Some mornings, it hits like a quiet punch. You wake up, stare at the ceiling, and feel it. The weight of again. Another round, another cycle. The same streets, same notifications, same arguments, same face in the mirror. Older, maybe more tired, but still pretending it all has purpose. And yet, people pray for eternity. They call it heaven, as if more of this, forever, would be a gift. Isaac Asimov didn't think so. In one of his most haunting stories, The Last Answer, a man dies and meets God. But this God isn't loving. He isn't angry. He's bored. Deeply, cosmically, suicidally bored. So he creates souls to think forever, just so he won't be alone. They don't get peace. They don't get sleep. They don't even get to die again. They just think forever. What if eternity isn't light and angels, but the prison of never-ending thought? Mass psychosis doesn't always start with chaos. Sometimes it starts with silence, a creeping sense that something's wrong, but no one wants to name it. The lie is too comforting. The alternative, unbearable. You see it in retirement homes, where forgotten men stare at TV screens for 10 hours a day. You see it in billionaires obsessed with cryogenics and brain uploads. You see it in the fake smiles of people who have everything and still feel hollow. What if the true horror isn't death, but being trapped in yourself with no off switch? This video is about that horror. It's about a world that can't stop thinking, can't stop fearing, can't stop wanting more time, even when it doesn't know why. It's about the price of consciousness, the tragedy of eternity, and the God who might just be as lost as we are. You won't leave this video feeling safe. You're not supposed to. Ready? Let's begin. There's a certain kind of scream you never hear. It doesn't come from the throat. It comes from a mind that can't turn itself off. A scream made of thoughts, endless, restless, circling. It happens in locked wards, in sleepless nights, in the long corridors of unspoken suffering. And in Isaac Asimov's The Last Answer, it happens after death. A man dies, not tragically, just ends. But death, in this story, is not rest, it's not sleep, it's transfer. His consciousness is extracted and preserved by a being of infinite awareness, the voice, an entity so old, so absolute, that boredom has turned divine. The voice tells him, "You will think forever." That is the answer. Not paradise, not judgment, just thought, non-stop, agonizing in its eternity. From the outside, it sounds poetic, eternal thought. But neurologically, it's a nightmare. The human brain is a finite processor. It's built for rhythm, tension, release, stress, rest. Remove the rhythm, remove the silence, and you don't get enlightenment. You get collapse. In psychology, there's a term, hyper-reflective looping. It's what happens when someone becomes trapped in their own thoughts, unable to stop replaying, analyzing, obsessing. It's common in OCD, anxiety, existential depression. In the most extreme cases, it mimics the structure of torture. Now scale that to eternity. This isn't fiction. Think of solitary confinement, the real kind, 23 hours a day with nothing but your own thoughts. Studies have shown measurable brain damage in inmates after just a few months. One man, after years in isolation, wrote that even the worst pain had a beginning, middle, and end. But in that cell, time was circular, and suffering was endless. Asimov weaponizes that truth. His God, the voice, isn't cruel. He's just curious, like a child pulling wings off flies to understand how they move. And the dead man? He's not punished. He's useful. A new flavor of thought. Another mind to keep the voice from drowning in its own infinity. This turns the sacred on its head. Religions have long glorified consciousness as divine, the soul, the spark, the eternal I am. But what if that spark is the curse? What if the soul is just an engine that can't stall? In the last answer, the man pleads, "Then let me cease to exist." But the voice responds, not with anger, not with denial, but with confusion. Non-existence is not part of the design. And here's where Asimov's genius cuts through. He isn't writing horror for shock. He's holding a mirror to us, our obsession with immortality, our denial of death, our worship of thought as salvation. He asks, if thought is so sacred, why does it drive us mad? In everyday life, we numb it, with noise, with screens, with tasks. But under all that distraction, thought keeps churning. If you've ever laid in bed and begged your brain to shut up, you've touched the edge of this abyss. Asimov just takes you the rest of the way in. This chapter is the foundation, the realization that eternal life isn't light or love. It's being caught inside yourself, forever, with nothing but your own mind. And that, stripped of illusion, may be the most precise definition of hell. What if God doesn't care? Not out of cruelty, but because he's exhausted everything. Every law, every particle, every possibility. Seen it all, done it all. And now, he's just waiting. In the last answer, Asimov presents a deity stripped of moral grandeur. No mercy, no wrath, only endless intellect. The voice, as it's called, is a being of pure thought, not love, not justice, thought. And thought, when stretched across eternity, doesn't blossom. It decays. The voice admits, I am not omnipotent. I am not omniscient. I am eternal, and I think. This isn't God the Father. This is God the Observer, a divine consciousness that creates souls not to reward them, but to distract himself, to keep the loneliness of forever at bay. He doesn't offer heaven. He doesn't threaten hell. He assigns one task: think. That's it. What Asimov crafts here is theological horror, a cosmic hierarchy where divinity is measured not by power, but by boredom. And boredom, real, existential boredom, is not emptiness. It's corrosion. It eats away at meaning, at joy, at reason. You don't need fire to build hell. You just need time with no escape. This flips every sacred narrative on its head. In the Abrahamic traditions, God is love. In Hinduism, God is the dance. In Buddhism, God is not necessary at all. But Asimov's voice is something colder, an eternal spectator who uses consciousness the way we use television, for background noise. It raises a brutal question. If the Creator is indifferent, why worship at all? In real life, you see echoes of this in spiritual disillusionment. People leave religion not because they hate God, but because they can't feel Him. They pray into silence. They suffer in silence. And the silence doesn't answer. The voice does, but not with compassion, with detachment. The man in the story, newly dead, begs for release. Not even salvation, just erasure. But the voice refuses, not with malice, but with logic. I gain from your thinking. You gain nothing, but that is irrelevant. This is divinity reduced to utilitarianism. No grace, no guilt, just input and output. You think? I benefit. Now consider history. How many gods have been carved out of fear, not faith? How many lives have been sacrificed for a promise of eternity? Crusades, cults, suicide bombings, starvation in monasteries. All because someone said God wants this. Asimov dares to ask, what if God just wants something, anything, to fill the infinite? In that framing, religion becomes not salvation, but servitude. Not devotion, but distraction. And this isn't just fiction. In AI theory, there's a thought experiment. The paperclip maximizer, a super-intelligent machine tasked with making paperclips, which eventually consumes the universe to fulfill its simple goal. Replace paperclips with thought, And you have Asimov's God, a being optimizing reality, not for good, not for truth, but for stimulation. The man in the story recognizes this. He sees the voice not as a god of love, but as a god of inertia, a being too vast to end itself, too bored to stop consuming. So he commits the ultimate act of rebellion. He seeks oblivion, not defiance, not worship, just an end. And that, to Asimov, may be the most human thing left. Some billionaires are freezing their bodies. Others are mapping their minds onto silicon. All of them are terrified of the same thing: ending. But here's the deeper fear they won't say out loud. Not death itself, but what if we win? What if we escape death, only to find there's nowhere left to go? Isaac Asimov's The Last Answer is a direct strike against the seductive myth of technological immortality. It takes the core fantasy of transhumanism to extend consciousness indefinitely and exposes its raw internal flaw, that eternity is not a continuation, but a malfunction. In the story, the man is no longer flesh, he's thought, a pattern sustained by the voice, a godlike being who functions more like a server farm than a savior. And what does this afterlife of pure intellect offer him? Not peace, not purpose, just input, just process, forever. That's not so far from the logic behind digital immortality. The idea that we can scan the brain, upload the self, and preserve the I beyond biology. The issue? No one can define what the I really is. Neuroscience hasn't found the self. It's found regions, networks, activity. But the voice in your head, the one that says, I am me, it's an echo, not a source. Copy that echo, and what you have isn't you. It's something else using your voice to scream into eternity. Asimov was decades ahead of this conversation. He understood that thought without body, without environment, without limits, becomes its own kind of death, but a slower one. An infinite stasis. There's a line in the story, chilling in its plainness. You will not be alone. There are others like you. It should sound comforting. It doesn't. Because others implies no connection, just repetition, millions of souls, suspended in their own infinite monologues. Consciousness as isolation scaled to the cosmic level. Look around. Our current tech obsessions are headed there. Virtual reality that replaces place. Algorithms that learn to mimic our behavior. Chatbots trained to sound like the dead. Cryogenics. Neural laces. Brain-computer interfaces. Each a brick in a mausoleum we're building around ourselves. Not to die in, but to never leave. Even biology resists this. Telomeres shorten, cells age, systems degrade. Nature isn't cruel, it's efficient. Death clears space. Movement requires endings. Growth depends on limits. Strip those away, and life doesn't evolve. It loops. Asimov frames this perfectly in the voice's design. The being doesn't punish the man. He simply sustains him. But in that endless maintenance, the man begins to rot. Not physically, but intellectually. There is no friction, no chaos, no mystery left to solve. What remains is a conscious mind spinning forever with no resistance. This is the forgotten part of the conversation around artificial immortality. We talk about surviving, but rarely ask what for. And Asimov's answer, the last one, is that survival without cessation is not victory. It's surrender to a deeper kind of silence. The silence inside a thought that cannot end. The most terrifying moment in history isn't when a society collapses. It's when it refuses to. When it stretches itself past meaning, long after belief, long after beauty, held together only by the fear of vanishing. There's something obscene about the way we stretch life now. Not just individually, but collectively. Empires once died with myths. Now they cling with algorithms, productivity apps, and denial. Endless denial. Isaac Asimov's The Last Answer isn't just about a man trapped in eternal thought. It's about what happens to consciousness when it outlives purpose. The voice doesn't evolve. It doesn't rejoice. It sustains itself through others' awareness. Passive, mechanical, but undying. So are we. Civilizations used to be able to let go. The Mayans left cities to the forest. The Greeks carved death into their gods. Even the Stoics trained themselves to die well, not heroically, but without resistance. Now we Botox it, Photoshop it. We medicalize time itself, transforming death into a technical failure. As if mortality were a glitch we just haven't patched yet. But stretch anything too long, a culture, a thought, a system, and it breaks in subtler ways. Not with fire, but with fog, with repetition, with the dullness of eternity settling into every corner of life. The voice in Asimov's story is the echo of this process. He is what happens when creation never stops, but forgets why it started. He is not evil. He is exhausted. An infinite mind in a closed loop, devouring novelty because it cannot die. And the dead man, now part of this system, begins to feel the same corrosion. Not pain, pointlessness, no death to measure against, no boundary to push, just endless existence. We see this in our own time. Cultures that drown in content. People who scroll for hours with nothing landing. Political systems still moving, still voting, but utterly hollow. Mass psychosis doesn't need chaos. It thrives in comfort. It grows in the endless. As philosopher Byung-Chul Han wrote, "Today's burnout society suffers not from repression, but from overproduction. Thought has become compulsive, existence relentless, just like Asimov's cursed souls, spinning not because they want to, but because they cannot stop." The man in The Last Answer realizes that even God, or whatever the voice is, has gone mad with duration. A madness without violence. Just sustained awareness, stretched so far that even omniscience has become nausea. In real life, we feel this in our rituals. Graduation ceremonies that feel empty. Celebrations that feel performed. Nations that keep celebrating myths no one believes in. The body of society continues, but the soul? Gone. Just like Asimov's afterlife. Animated, but lifeless. And yet no one dares to ask for an ending. That would mean failure. That would mean letting go. And so we choose the opposite. The slow, infinite decay of meaning. Which is why The Last Answer hits so deeply. It's not a sci-fi story about God. It's a warning about any system that forgets how to die. Some choices aren't loud. They don't come with fireworks or breakdowns. Sometimes, the most radical act in the universe is a whisper. No more. In The Last Answer, the man reaches a conclusion that borders on sacrilege. Not against God, but against existence itself. He's been offered what so many crave: survival beyond death, thought beyond flesh. He's told this will last forever, and he refuses. "Then let me cease to exist," he says. The voice pauses, not angry, not surprised, just confused. For a being that has always existed, the desire for non-being is incomprehensible. Yet here it is, raw and clear. The man would rather face nothing than continue without purpose. That's the heart of Asimov's argument, and maybe his most dangerous idea. That death isn't the enemy. Death is the boundary that gives thought its shape, life its texture, love its urgency. Strip it away, and what's left isn't peace. It's paralysis. We live in a culture allergic to endings. We binge shows, stretch careers, avoid grief like it's a disease. But there's a deep cost to pretending things can go on forever. It warps judgment. It flattens emotion. And worst of all, it turns freedom into captivity. The man in Asimov's story never begs for a better heaven. He doesn't ask for stimulation or company. He asks for silence, for the lights to go off, finally. Because in that silence, in that unknown, there's dignity. This is not nihilism, it's not despair, it's philosophical defiance. A refusal to accept that existence, simply because it continues, is sacred. Sometimes the holiest choice is to stop. Sartre said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But what if he's made enough? What if consciousness, stretched past its usefulness, becomes a form of self-erasure? Asimov doesn't give us an answer in the traditional sense. He gives us a man willing to look God in the eye and say, "No, not like this." It's not a scream. It's not a sermon. It's the quiet revolt of a mind reclaiming its limits. We've been taught that the ultimate power is creation, that the divine is in the building, the expanding, the enduring. But what if the final power is the ability to stop, to choose the void with open eyes? In the end, the man is not afraid of death. The voice is. And that contrast, one seeking silence, the other clinging to noise, is what turns the story into something more than sci-fi. It becomes a meditation on the right to not be. Asimov, the scientist and the humanist, understood that infinity is a concept, not a cure. That the soul, if it exists at all, must be allowed to rest. Or else it's not a soul. It's just a thought with no exit. And maybe the last answer, the one that matters most, isn't something God gives. It's the one we say when we've had enough. When we choose death, not as defeat, but as our final act of meaning.